Hi, and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 1216B, and today's date is February 28th, 2017, and the title of the episode is the Deep State Pushing the U.S. into a Nuclear Confrontation? Now, before I get started, I just want to make an announcement. I uploaded an interview with Simon Black. He's from sovereignman.com. If you go over to the X22 Report Spotlight YouTube channel, you'll see the video there. Or you can come over to the X22Report.com site, scroll down a little bit, look over to the right-hand side, you'll see the video there. Or you can go to newssentinel.com, same thing, scroll down a little bit, look over to your right-hand side, and you can play the video there. Let's get into the economic collapse, political and geopolitical news. Now, we know there's a lot of leaks in the White House right now, and Trump is trying to narrow down who these leaks are coming from. They've already found out that Katie Walsh was one of them, McCain was another. And right now, Trump is blaming Obama for the protest against him and other Republicans, as well as some of the leaks from the White House. He said, I think President Obama is behind it because his people are certainly behind it. And we can see right now, most likely this is the case. Now, in regards to natural news, we know that it's been 6 days and natural news has been censored. They've been removed from Google completely. 140,000 pages gone in a split second. And Google has never given natural news a reason. Now, from everyone out there talking about it, everyone signing the petition, it looks like Google has reinstated natural news right now. And what has happened here is that there were never any allegations or evidence that natural news had intentionally violated Google's webmaster guidelines. And Google said that the site was being flagged for a so-called sneaky mobile redirect on a very small number of pages in a subdomain, which was blogs.naturalnews.com. And this was created for outside bloggers. And Google went to the extraordinary step of banning the entire site. Now, there was no evidence, no charges, but you're guilty because they say you are. So this entire process was guilty, and you're not innocent at all. You have to prove your innocence. So it's happening the opposite way. Instead of you're innocent and they have to prove your guilt, you're guilty and you have to prove your innocence. But we can see that Google, they really had no reason to do this. And we can see that the site was brought up. Now, was this a test to see how people reacted? Were they testing to see, can they get away with this? And I'm not just talking about Google. I'm talking about the deep state behind all of this. Well, one thing we do know, and it just came out, that there was a newly declassified document that shows that the CIA works closely with owners, journalists with many of the largest media outlets. Now, that probably is not a surprise to many people out there, because many of us realize, and we've seen other documentation, that the CIA is in bed with the corporate media. And the United States Senate Select Committee to Study Governmental Operations with respect to intelligence activities found in 1975 that the CIA submitted stories to the American press. And fast forward today, the same exact thing is happening, with one caveat. Because the government right now is still paying off reporters to spread disinformation. And the corporate media are acting like virtual escort services for the moneyed elites, selling access for a price to powerful government officials instead of actually investigating and reporting on what those officials are doing. Now, one of the ways the U.S. government spreads propaganda is by making sure that it gets its version out first. There's no proof. We've seen this before. They just put it out there. It's propaganda. They never show their sources, where this information is coming from. It's always anonymous. Sometimes there's no information whatsoever. And we have to remember something very important. In 2013, the American Congress repealed the formal ban against the deployment of propaganda against the U.S. citizens living on American soil. So they can use propaganda on the people of the United States. And this is why you've seen propaganda soar since 2013. This is why they just come out with whatever they want to say, and they don't show any proof. But when they're called on to show proof, guess what? They can't do it. And most of the corporate media right now, I'm talking about the important stories, the stories that matter. I'm not talking about the local stories in your neighborhood or what an actress says or what the Kardashians are doing. I'm talking about real stories. What's happening in the Middle East? What's happening with the monetary system? The information that affects everyone. Guess what? They use propaganda. They omit things. They don't tell you everything. And from this newly declassified document, well, it shows once again, this is exactly what they're doing. Now, something interesting happened with the European Union and the French presidential candidate Marine Le Pen. They took away her parliamentary immunity. She's been charged with publishing violent images on her Twitter account of graphic images of terrorists beheading prisoners, one of whom was a U.S. journalist. Now, the EU voted overwhelmingly to remove Le Pen's immunity. Now, we know that she's up for an election coming up very soon in France. And we know that she wants to pull away from the EU, that she sees the situation in Syria where it needs to be ended, where she sees the situation in Ukraine, well, it needs to be ended. She's calling out that that was like a coup d'etat. Crimea really belongs to Russia. And what we're seeing right now is that by removing this immunity, because the immunity shields her from prosecution, well, now she can be prosecuted for anything. And what we're seeing right now is that she's fighting this, saying, no, the tweets were within appropriate bounds. The tweets were showing and naming the horror of Islam. But we can see why they did this. They did this on purpose. Remember, in France, in Germany, and many other countries, they're using Russia is cyber attacking to show that if the elections don't go their way, they're going to say Russia manipulated them. They're trying to suppress or get rid of the other candidates. And you can see that this is happening in many different countries because these individuals, they're afraid of losing their power. They're afraid of losing the election. Because what will they become? They will lose their control. And if these other individuals are put into place, like here in the United States, well, this is going to be a big problem. And the central bankers, the deep state, the elite, they don't want this to happen. And they're going to do whatever they have to keep control, to keep the power. And as we move closer and closer to the elections, we're going to see things really heat up in this area. Now, out in South Korea, we know that South Korea, well, they made this land swap deal to get the THAAD missile system into their country. And now we're seeing protesters out there saying they do not want this at all in their countries. Demonstrators are holding signs, chanting slogans, and they're gathering in front of the headquarters in Seoul. And we can see right now they are saying, listen, we don't want this in here. But we can see that they're not going to be listened to. The THAAD system will be placed in South Korea because what we're seeing right now is a huge push in the agenda to provoke North Korea. And since the assassination of Kim Jong-un's half-brother, we can see that they're making the play to say that North Korea has chemical weapons. Now, they started out over the weekend saying this, and now they're building this up because South Korea is out there. They are warning that North Korea has thousands of tons of chemical weapons laying dormant across the country, waiting to be used. And they're saying that the assassination of Kim Jong-un's brother proves they're willing to use them. Now, this is coming from South Korea. This is all part of the agenda to bring in more military assets into the region. This is a way to provoke North Korea. They did the same thing in Syria with Assad with his chemical weapons. You can see they're using the same narrative. Nothing has changed because they're going to make their move in North Korea. And most likely this is why China stepped back, where they said, you know what, we're not going to import their coal from North Korea. We don't want to be a part of this. And we can see that they're pushing for regime change in North Korea. And I have a funny feeling things are really going to heat up in this area, and we're going to see something happen. Now, there's a new investigation which has revealed many different failures in the cruise missile intercept, which eliminates enemy threats. Now, these are the warheads that fire from smaller scale nuclear powers like North Korea, as one example, which we don't even know if they really have nuclear weapons that can be mounted on missiles. So they're really talking about Iran, they're talking about Russia, but there's been a lot of problems. This is the missile shield. And the ground-based mid-course defense system is maintained by the Pentagon, and it's supposed to limit the nuclear strikes coming from these different countries. And what is happening here is that the interceptor's thrusters failed during simulation tests. They don't work, causing the interceptor to stray from its flight path. But also, on top of this, the GMD contractors, well, they're saying that everything has been successful. And when we look at this GAO report, the GMD flight testing to date was insufficient, and it shows that these systems do not work. So it looks like these missile defense systems, they're lemons. They don't work. They're not going to protect against anything. Now, it looks like the United States is pushing more sanctions on Syria, and Putin is out there saying this is completely inappropriate at this point in time to introduce new sanctions against the Syrian government. And we can see that it doesn't matter because the deep state, the central bankers, they're pushing their agenda. They have a goal. They want Damascus, or they're going to try to split up Syria. I mean, it doesn't matter to them at this point as long as they can get this gas pipeline in, as long as they can get part of Syria, because they're going to go after the other part later on. And the UN Security Council will vote on Tuesday on a proposal, and it looks like Russia is going to veto this. Now, they're bringing up the entire propaganda about chemical weapons in Syria, how Assad has been using chemical weapons, and from every report that is out there, it shows that the moderate rebels, the Islamic State, Al-Qaeda, the terrorists have been using these chemical weapons. We see U.S. Special Forces, they have arrived in Manbij, and they have enforced the demarcation line in northern Syria, and we can see that weapons now are coming into the Kurdish region, and we can see that more and more weapons are coming into this area. We understand the Pentagon is trying to push troops into this area. We know Saudi Arabia wants to bring troops into this area, and we can see that they're going to be trying to push their agenda to get Assad. I mean, this is what it looks like right now. Now, the Pentagon's counterterrorism chief, Lieutenant General Michael Nagata, he is warning that the terrorists have demonstrated a clear intention to use drones. And, the little handheld drones that they throw up in the air, this is what they're trying to convince us of, that they're using these highly maneuverable, lethal weapon drones. And they're making the case where they need to bring in these drone swarms. And what it is that there's drones from the United States which are all linked together, and it looks like a gigantic swarm, and they all can be controlled to do different maneuvers, and there's hundreds of them, and they want to bring them into Syria because they're very difficult to knock out of the sky. And when there's a lot of them, and when they're armed, they are lethal. And we can see right now this is what they want to do in there, because this is part of the plan to go after Assad. Now, the Syrian opposition is out there, and they are claiming they have solid evidence that the Syrian government is cooperating with the Islamic State. And they have visual evidence that they're going to supply to the UN. Now, this is kind of ridiculous, because they're saying that Assad allowed the Islamic State to take control of Palmyra. So you're saying that Russia and the Syrian armed forces fought like crazy to take back Palmyra, and then Assad decided, we're going to let the Islamic State have it back. I mean, that's what they're trying to say. And further allegations included close cooperation and coordination between the government and ISIS in Homs. Well, again, that sounds absolutely ridiculous. What they're trying to do is shift who has relations with the Islamic State. But it's not going to work because Russia and Syria has actual evidence. Remember that whole entire mop-up job where the special forces went into certain areas, retrieved documentation, destroyed certain areas with bombings inside of Syria, inside of Iraq? Well, that was done on purpose because they didn't want anyone to find out that there was a connection between the United States government central bankers and the Islamic State. But Russia and Syria, they have evidence. They've provided evidence that they are involved. Actually, Iraq has provided evidence that the Islamic State and the United States government central bankers, well, they work together. The U.S. supports, drops humanitarian aid, drops ammunition, gives them support. Because think about it. All this time there were convoys of oil trucks leaving Syria, going into Turkey. You can see it from the satellites, completely obvious. And throughout the entire year, the United States did nothing about it until Russia pointed it out and started to destroy the convoy. Then the U.S., to save face, said, okay, we'll destroy the convoy first. We'll destroy the convoy also, and what we'll do is, when no one's looking, we're going to drop leaflets so our paid mercenaries get out of the truck before we destroy the convoy. They gave them a warning. And we can see right now that they're trying to create this narrative. It's not going to work. They've tried so many different things, and it just doesn't work. Now, it looks like the deep state, they're trying to get the United States into a nuclear confrontation. That's what it seems like on the surface, because we know that Trump, when he was campaigning, he wanted to rebuild the U.S. military by diverting a lot more funding into the armed forces. And it wasn't just the conventional forces. He wanted to build up the nuclear arsenal. Now, I think we should be going the other way. I think we should be getting rid of the nuclear arsenal, making deals with China and Russia like we had before, and limiting the amount of nuclear weapons, but he wants to do the opposite. And according to the report, the Defense Science Board, it urges the president to consider altering existing and planned U.S. armaments to achieve a greater number of lower-yield weapons that could provide a tailored nuclear option for limited use. The strategy behind limited nuclear use sounds deceptively simple. You need to escalate a conflict just enough to end it. As the theory goes, using low-yield nuclear weapons against an adversary's conventional forces will demonstrate that you mean serious business and might be crazy enough to launch an all-out nuclear attack. Now, this supposedly will cause the enemy to blink and ultimately back down, rather than risk a global nuclear war. Well, as we know, these nuclear states, they're not going to back down. They're going to see a nuclear weapon go off in their country. They're going to use their nuclear weapons against the United States. So this plan is not going to work, because any limited nuclear war would eventually lead to a full-scale nuclear war. The linchpin of a limited nuclear war is the tactical nuke. These are nuclear weapons that have a much smaller yield than a strategic nuke. But those countries like China, like Russia, they're going to see a nuclear detonation and they're going to retaliate. And we have a problem with our missile shield system where they don't work. The thrusters don't work. They veer off course. The whole thing is a huge problem. Maybe we should just cancel war altogether. Maybe we should go for peace instead. But we know the central bankers, the deep state, they are pushing for a war. This is why they're going down this route. They're maneuvering, they're pushing their agenda. Because as the economy continually deteriorates, things get worse, they need a cover-up. They need a story before it is blamed on them. We already know that Janet Yellen was out there saying, listen, the economy is disappointing, it's weak, and don't blame the Fed if things go wrong. And we can see already through all the economic data, things are rapidly deteriorating. And they were hoping to have a war to cover this up because it is a perfect way to cover up what is about to happen, because all eyes would be focused on the war. Then they can say, okay, everyone has to sacrifice. Everyone, you will not be getting food. We're going to have to ration food, because remember, when this happens, the economic collapse doesn't go away. Credit markets are still going to freeze up, which we see happening already. Supplies will dry up. We can't manufacture anything ourselves. The imports will slow down. It will be a complete disaster. The rest of the world will lose faith in the dollar. They will start dumping treasuries like crazy because they're going to be getting ready for war. And the economy here and the people living here, it's going to be a disaster for quite a while. Now, Cliff High is saying this is going to last for 5 years. So my suggestion to everyone is get prepared for what is coming, because what we're seeing right now is what happened in 2008, but this is on steroids. This is going to be much worse. And that time frame is getting closer and closer. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.